short gospel is something which lived out, gives us our hallmark. The evangelical way of living is quite counter-culture. The story is told, and it is true, of the holy Bishop of Geneva, at that time in exile in Annecy, Saint François de Sales, Francis of Sales, who, when bishop, had a priest under him who was a thorn in his flesh. However, he wasn't a bad priest, just a nuisance. And he had qualities, and your good man knew it. Eventually, there was a vacancy in a territory which depended on this saint in exile, because the Calvinists had Geneva itself, where he should have been residing. What did he do? He appointed this priest bishop there. And when the priest got wind of it, he broke down in tears. And the comment in the book which I was reading on the matter was something to this effect: Il a compris la vengeance des saints. He understood the vengeance of the saints. Brute force has a brutal effect. In the Second World War, we know by now that, humanly speaking, when it was the question of the crucial débarquement, famous D-Day, the Germans, by brute force, could easily have won and stopped that débarquement. Brute force. But the Allies, and in particular the British forces, had another instrument, that of extremely well thought out intelligence. And you know what happened at the end of the war. It was through taking in the Führer that it was won. Now the details are known. It was through giving false information to key people, young people, who would be parachuted into occupied territory in France, where they knew that eventually they would be caught and put to the question, and you know what that means. And therefore, under atrocious pressure, a certain number would crack. They had to believe in this information, for that information to be filtered through to the Führer as the truth. It actually worked, and the proof is that Hitler believed precisely what they wanted him to believe, that the true débarquement was to be at Pas-de-Calais, where he had these huge panzer divisions waiting. So they were kept there. And other things too. The débarquement, which was of course the real one, was only a ploy. So it worked. Translate. Brute force, when we have to do with a conversation, or intelligence, not raising the voice. The power of the acumen, which pierces the weakness in the argument before us, and never slightly loses its cool or raises the decibels, waits for a pause and hits just that point that was missed. It explodes calmly and serenely all the other had been saying at high speed and temperature. It's a clue I'm giving you, my friends, because many go through life in that other mode. Two conversations never meeting. Now, brute force is linked with something else. It's linked with pride. I'd like for a few seconds to dwell on the link between pride brute force, and the link between the soul who manifests these symptoms with the author of these, Old Nick. Because people who have certain tendencies, and whatever they do, fail in administering them and managing them, indicate that they are somehow under the influence of Old Nick. Observe now what is going on in the debate in the media. Arguments which are fallacious and based on bits of truth, things bandied about, people thinking for themselves, people not listening, people angry, all symptoms of the other guy and his behaviour right at the beginning of his fall. The capacity to listen is only given to those who have the capacity to be humble enough to know that they have something to learn. To aggress with a loud voice and to cloud and crowd out other messages is to participate in the original sin of pride, which knows it all. Just now, I took this off the wall from the kitchen. Ellen had just purchased this in the new Benedictine Foundation just outside our parish. And this, as it happens, rejoins something I want to say. There, the inscription is Quis ut Deus, who is like God. Now, what happened at the beginning of time was this. The angels were not going to be allowed to see and enjoy the fullness of ecstasy and vision and bliss, the fullness, until they had made themselves in some way responsible for entering into it. There was a test. Even in the angelic cycle of creation, God did not want robots, automata. It was too easy. And the test, we are told, was that they were shown by participation in divine knowledge that eventually they would be asked to worship something who would appear to them inferior to themselves. The incarnation. And it would seem also that even in the corner of the Father's eye was the existence of a creature who would be brighter even than Lucifer, bringer of light. That's the meaning of his name. The brightest creature ever, our Blessed Lady. Now, there was, at that point, an immediate change of tone in the cosmos, which had been harmonious and peaceful to the utmost. God being the only one in existence, and his court of angels being all that was. At this point, a jarring note seeped in. Something changed. And because of the total responsibility, there entered very quickly a succession of new modalities in which independence and rebellion came in. Now, you imagine the most brilliant of creatures. He will want to be like God. He will want to reign and own what he has. And at that point, we are already beginning the fundamental jarring note. Hell did not exist as yet. And it seems that Lucifer did not think that God was capable of creating some sphere in which there would be pain. At that point, he was seeing that he had these great powers, and he wanted, of course, his court. Come with me, brethren. And there was a lot of power around, and beauty. At this point, St. Michael, who was a lower angel than Lucifer, was given huge powers. And he rallied the angels, as many as he could keep safe. And there was, we are told, a huge battle in the heavens. Now, quis ut Deus was the war cry. Who is like God? The exact counterposition of O Nick. Which, by the way, we see again in our time, if we're careful and observe calmly, even on the golden ones. Now, at that point, and only at that point, was invented, created, allowed to be something which made the Father weep in his divine heart. He had to find a place where this, by now fundamentally evil presence, could be as far as possible from the abode of peace. But hell began to be, created not for anything else, but for this angelic crash, completely responsible for what had happened, completely responsible, and therefore irreversibly responsible. Now, what happens when a great king falls? Or when, in Ireland, a brother receives the inheritance? Is that not familiar? Envy, jealousy, hatred, and its consequence, vengeance. So, the devil was not going to be entirely confined to hell, it would seem, while this second cycle of creation came along. Man would not be total in his responsibility in his test, hence the possibility of recuperation. But from the beginning, and we have it in Genesis, the man who was being created was entering into what? This universe in which there was already the jarring note. Therefore, it wasn't just neutral territory. The serpent. That serpent, by the way, whom we find again in New Age, the serpent part at the base of the spine and so on. Does that sound familiar? Crafty. Crafty is the word given to us by Scripture. Crafty. Crafty and intelligent, because he's kept all the faculties of that angelic and supremely angelic intelligence that he was given. And he can use it in reverse. Far more intelligent than we are. Now do you see what's happening? There's a huge number. We don't know how many angels were created, and we knew roughly that about a third of them fell. Now do you imagine how many demons are around? All over the place. Huge number in hell, but right now a huge number around. And it would seem that we're in a time of supreme testing. Our generation. He hates the soul, and he'll do anything to get one more soul. And the brighter that soul, the more he hates it. Hence the priests are attacked. Families are attacked. The innocent are attacked. The innocent, notice, are attacked. And by the way, this zooming in to the tip of the iceberg and trying to copulate priest with paedophile is very interesting, when actually the iceberg is in the family. The huge majority of cases, and of course never talked about, are in the family. There's abuse everywhere in the family. Ashamed to talk about it. But that's where the problem is. The Anyway, the devil then is using anything that he can find to get at these immortal souls who are in danger of taking his throne, and also anything which can in any way bend his spleen and hatred for his Creator, therefore the Blessed Sacrament. And also anything which can attack and damage the means of salvation of these hominids that we are, therefore the Church. It's not indifferent. And by the way, everything to do with Satan is an aping of the divine cult. He has everything in reverse, including a hugely well-organized system of cult. Satanic cult is extremely well organized. They've got to get a certain number of hosts by a certain time every month, and it all happens at the same time. 3 o'clock in the night is the maximum of their satanic cult, as 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the high point of divine mercy. Hosts are disappearing all the time from our tabernacles and churches, and people don't know about it. They've got to get them all the time. And now the price of hosts has gone down on the black market because it's easier to get them. And they're very easily to get when the sacrament is given on the hand. And by the way, the Freemasons were trying as early as 1925, we know it from documentation, to aim towards getting communion in the hand, and also other things which have come in discreetly, not through the will of the Council of Fathers, but through disobedience from bishops and priests in certain parts of Europe, particularly Holland, Germany and France, in the 60s and 70s, which forced the hand of the Holy Father against his wishes and satisfied Satan. So every time we collude with those, and anything which is vaguely attacking the sacred, and plenty of things are attacking the sacred, we are playing the devil's game. Remember that, because few things are actually seen for what they are. It's not just a casual, bit by bit, letting go of things. It's a positive attack on the sacred, and the devil is using people in position to make that happen. He inspires even priests who perhaps are not, if that's the case, usually it's linked with a lack of interiority, able to pick up what they're responsible for when they encourage, e.g., disobedience. Because outside the will of God, as manifested in the Missal, there is no pleasing of the one that we are adoring. We are participating in that original I of the demon who thinks he can disobey God and please God, or at least please somebody. We can't please God on our own terms. It has to be in that humility of obedience, because the fundamental issue always is that of the creature surrendering to and not commanding even God, which is happening in disobedience in liturgical abuse. I have in the house 2 volumes of testimonies given with regard to specifically liturgical abuses which have been known in exorcism to have been pinpointed by the exorcists in question. The devil, under exorcism, against his wish, has been obliged to say and admit certain specific things in the years after the council till now, that certain things were being inspired by him, certain things which by now have become practice, not because it was the will of the Council of Fathers, but because the demon wanted to attack the sacred, anything to hit at God. So what we are witnessing, my friends, is not the positive will of God in many areas, but the permissive will of God. The Church has had to catch up with things that were happening and regularize things which were savage. Do you see the difference between the positive will of God and the permissive will? It's not enough to say it's allowed, therefore it's the will of God. No. Remember that when it comes to things that you are feeling in your heart, that you know by a gut reaction that can't be right, not to be the will of God, that you are responsible then for that intuition which the Spirit of God is putting on your heart, e.g. when you're in prayer before the monstrance. He may allow you to feel what is not pleasing to his sacred heart and to make reparation for it. I'm coming across more and more people who have been, out of generosity, involved with the Blessed Sacrament, lay people who have been made aware in prayer that actually, although there's goodwill there, they're actually part of the problem. Now, it's time to conclude, but I would underline a few areas where the devil has been obliged to admit, under pressure in exorcism, that certain things he has been responsible for. Communion in the hand, he has pushed. Communion standing, he has pushed. The dismantling of the altar rails, he has pushed. This one will puzzle you, but he was pushing from the beginning that the altar should be placed in such a way that man should be the attention of the celebration. You see that? When you go into a celebration, often what you're looking at. That's not indifferent. Not indifferent at all. There's something of the entering into there, isn't there? God pushed aside. Applause in church. Jesus pushed aside. God not worshipped in the centre. Tabernacles pushed to one side. Old Nick. Dethrone God. Talking in church. Assembly. Man. So, pick up. Open your antennae. This is not just human thinking. We are involved in a battle. And part of that battle is that for the cult of the demon to be complete, there has to be blood. Freemasonry is perfectly well organized, and at the highest level there is blood, sacrifice. Also, in the satanic cult as such, there is blood. There are people being born into that cult, never registered. Children are being sacrificed eventually. It happens at certain points in the year. The devil must have blood. He must have the blood of the innocent. Does that sound vaguely familiar? He wants the blood of the innocent in this land which was very uncomfortable and which he wants to conquer to get his last jewel in his crown.